and funds everything in Hong Kong. You know, half of the university is probably funded by Jockey Club and all health programs, etc. So they don't fund anything. So if you are really relying on philanthropists or raising money or international funding, which is extremely difficult to justify, because why would you fund something in Hong Kong when Hong Kong is where you come to fundraise? So that's driven wedges within the sector. It's a very, very small sector, but it's very protective, because also it's about a face, you know, it's about I may not actually be delivering what I say I'm delivering or I'm funded to deliver, so I'm not really going to tell you, even though you're a community organisation and we work with exactly the same people, but I'm not really going to share what I'm doing with you. So actually the only way that we know what happens is through our clients, or through the communities who are accessing these services. So that's really where I think we need some help, because there are two refugee-led organisations that have formed because they are fed up of the NGO politics, and they're fed up of lack of transparency, and they want ownership and lack of being consulted with and being asked what they need, rather than NGOs coming up with all these programs thinking this is what we think you need, this is what's in your best interest because we've decided we're the experts, or this is where the money is. So that's really where, you know, it's kind of, I know in Australia it's very developed, like in, you know, many places where that has a developed system, but we have the facade of being developed, but actually we're pretty much on the lines of developing, and many of the infrastructure just isn't there. So I think it's really what assistance, I mean, would the advice be actually forget about the sector and just go work with community-led groups directly, work with them to figure out what we need, and then it's donor education. But you know, for example, we are going to lose our funding for psychosocial services from May. So from May, we may have no psychosocial services in place for not just our clients, but any asylum seeker. So it's really that real advice as to how do we tackle this. And at Justice Centre, we've been running our program for 4 years, and it's been taking many different shapes and forms because it's an iterative process of learning. But the crux is, as much as we've tried, it's been so hard to have organisations just talk to each other and tell so that we can figure out what's the best. We don't want to duplicate services. So that's really what the advice, I think, Miguel is.
Australia, with all its resources, can I say that there is still, wherever there is competition for funds, there isn't collaboration, basically. And that happens in every country. If people are competing for funds, there's not collaboration. And in fact, it's actually one of the things we're pretty lucky about is that we can partner with anyone in Australia because we're not competing with their funds and we're not competing with ours. But in the settlement sector, there's huge competition around that, and it's quite nasty. So one of the things that I would say is that we've really benefited from being very clear about our mission and our specialisation, and being very clearly based within refugee communities themselves, and having very clear connections with the leaders of those communities and people in those communities, and that's what sustained our services in the midst of that competition and that sort of out there. That because we've been very clearly based within and have a very clear refugee voice, if you like, within the services, and we're seen as really embedded in that, that's been our... It's brought us the kudos we need, if you like. It's people recognise that the services are valued for that, and recognise that people have a say over the type of services that they receive, and that's been the value for our services. We're not seen as someone which is separated off and has their own opinion. And so a lot of organisations come to us to partner, and then we can actually make our funds go twice as far. So in the broader space, you might, for us, this is an Australian context, but you might have a mainstream mental health service that really, thinks they need and want to offer some services in their community, and they'll come to us and we'll offer something jointly, which makes our funds go twice as far. But it's because we're seen as being that voice. Does that I think that's about being very clear and being very... And one of the things that we say a lot to other services is we don't want to step on their patch. This is what we do very well. This is what our specialisation is. We recognise your specialisation is that. We're not going to step on your patch, but we're really happy to work with you. And then we're not seen as a threat.
I think the thing that you have been doing is preventions of violence, prevention of to promote the safe society as well, to do the mental health for vulnerable populations. This is not common in any country. So Thailand and Australia have actually good relationship, especially with the police force. And I think it might be a good idea for me that you said you're an NGOs, yeah? How is the relationship with your government, and how can you probably pass technical assistance to both NGOs and government entities that dealing with mental health? Because in your context, we don't have lacking of resources of mental health and health personnel. We have quite good systems, but it's not for vulnerable population like refugees and rural population. It's only for rich people coming in and out of Thailand and doing cosmetics or whatever surgery. So relationship between the NGO like you and the mental health health personnel is really limited for NGO like us to enter or to talk to them. It's not the way from your NGO with the Australian government to talk to our authority or to provide technical assistance to the NGOs that lacking of support from in-house.
Yeah. And we'd be...
Is that yours?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be happy. If not keep us, but the FAST network as a whole would be happy. And we've done some work so for example, the New Guinean government asked 2 of our staff to go and deliver training around vicarious trauma with our staff who are processing people claiming asylum in New Guinea. So 2 of our staff went up to Port Moresby and did some of that training. OST, which is the overseas agency, has done some international training around that as well. So we're really happy to provide some technical advice. And I actually think our government would also be happy to do that at a government level. The Australian government is actually quiet but quite proud of the way it's funded the recovery services it funds. Nani, do we need to be conscious of time?
It was just one question around research, because at the beginning you opened the presentation with saying you have access to data, you're collecting data. What do you do with this data? So the reason I ask is what Juliet didn't talk about yesterday at all actually, but it was interestingly in response to Upal's kind of call about what are you doing actually about the perpetrators. So one of the things that Freedom from Torture actually does do is use the evidence base of their data, and they do a lot of advocacy at the international level, and in fact have been very successful with Sri Lanka, and now at the moment they're working on the Congo. So it's that's using clinical evidence, but it's part of a wider policy and advocacy strategy at the domestic and at the international level. So what I wanted to ask, is that what you're also doing? Because that's something in Hong Kong which we are, certainly Justice Centre, that's how we operate our policy and advocacy, strategies using data. So I just wanted to know, what are you doing with your data?
So we use our data extensively, for reporting back to government, but we use our data to tell a story. And the story is actually what enables those services to be supported through government. Governments love to be able to tell a story. They love data. So the use of that data, and the clinical data in particular, so symptomology, that sort of stuff, they just love, and we use it very effectively to do that. So twice a year we combine all of our data across Australia so we can go back to government and say this is what we've done. I did bring some reports that I brought some yesterday, and that actually is a picture of our collective data over the last 5 years. We do that very effectively. Research is a really interesting area for us, and it's a bit of a two-edged sword. So we do quite a lot of research with universities and with others, but the off-cut of that is we find a lot of people want to do research which is in danger of re-triggering. So a lot of people actually want to do research which, can I interview torture survivors so I know how they're coping, or get to the depth of their experiences, and we go, nah. Because we won't participate in any research that has a detrimental impact on individual clients, but collectively we're really happy to provide information and work with researchers, and we do a lot, from gender-based studies to how people from different countries are coping with the asylum process. In fact, one of the things is I'm actually retiring next year, and one of the people, there's two people replacing me, and one of them is in fact an academic, and one of the reasons he's coming in is in fact to try and do more research around some of the work that we do, and to share that research internationally. So the research that we find, we would, and starts, the New South Wales and Victoria Service do a lot of research now, but the research we find would be happy for other people to use in telling the story of what happens to people. And we're doing quite a lot of work with the IRCT around our database and how we can compare our databases, because ours is a bit different, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and thank you for sharing with us how you work in Queensland. And what I found particularly interesting, and I actually wanted to make a quick comment, was what you said about hope. Because as legal professionals, what I see is in working with these people, a lot of the hope gets transferred to us, and what we try to manage is that hope as well. And what you said about the day-to-day hope is something that I was really drawn to. Given in Hong Kong and all of these jurisdictions, people do tend to feel extremely hopeless. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here, and can ask you questions. We do actually have a coffee break now. It's not written into the agenda, but there's coffee outside, and there are biscuits outside. And when we come back, there will be a breakout session gathering all the comments we have on detention, and doing a deep dive into that with Gary Alton from New South Wales, and then that will be in this room, and the other breakout is on strategic litigation and torture survivors. That will be led by Jamie Kerr, coming here from Scotland. So that will be in room 624 downstairs. So once you've had your coffee, maybe we need to shorten the coffee break to just 10 minutes or so, and you can start making your way to the breakout session that you wish to join. Thank you.
I think look at what I feel most people come to me, and I just really it's about, and I think the other thing is that I've got so many of this is about, in some ways that as an organisation, every now and then it's like, but if we look at the times there's a lot of them. And I think we forget that because the cases are so complex and it kind of overwhelms the fact that 90% of the population but 10% that's what stays with you, right? That's what stays with everyone. That's the one that takes all the resources of the agency, that 10%. Right. So someone who presents suicidal, safety plan, and the people who typically some of the clients we work with to remove is actually which is pretty awesome. So what we would do is say, look, we would always have to, was under we have to support, but at the end of that, we have to tell them, but you can only do something. And that's what we say, we always, you can only do this much. This is all you can do. If someone then chooses to exercise their own control, it's not because what you haven't done. That actually might be do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I have two cases that I've just like struggle with in terms of the people that most need help. And that's the thing I realise there's so much I can do and try to hang on and think about too much that it's actually not going to help me or anyone else.
But it's also about recognising and that's what I mean. So, you know, with the counsellor, we say something, so this is you know, like, at the end of the day, if you are professionally and ethically have done everything, then in fact, we can't remove our control. And if they then choose to do something, that's and to remove that choice is actually just as bad. You know, like it's actually does that make sense? Might not be the outcome. Most people who commit suicide don't actually to be honest. Most people who commit suicide people who actually do so because they can't want to get it. So to be honest, that is actually just connecting the services.
I absolutely know how this is
And we certainly have in our unfunded counselling, so that's that kind of the council exhausted way of things. Because once you've done Australia, you're actually fixed, to be honest. I mean, you know, like we don't have it all. Isn't broken, it may not be. You might not, but you know, you're fixed. So it's that group that narrative. And they may in fact do it. Because part of that process is about safety.
yeah.
So the talent that's a classic population. Because in the Sri Lankan and most of the time don't think about it. No, the government perspective they will. So they will be returned. And that's the big issue. And that's where we actually, that population is also so they will pull into that's actually, we haven't actually had any yet. But that's, they come in and go, I'm going to be returned. There are children.
Thanks so much for making that part of the conversation. No, I just want to say thanks so much. It was fantastic presentation. It just kind of so much, you can get so kind of down. Just people kind of things that go
well, that's what I was just saying. We have to work a lot with our staff. I was saying 10% of our clients are complex, heavy, like nothing's really wrong. They tick every wrong box in life.
Yes,
No one's going to give them protection, they're not resilient, they're not prepared. 90% of often goes wrong. So we forget that because it goes wrong. But also we work a lot with our counselors. This is what you can take responsibility for. And at the end of the day, that person also has the right to have some control over what they do. It's not you to determine what they do.
It's amazing the possibility of people let me go and things like very comfortable services it's really sort of case by particular case, how can you kind of navigate the public health system, then you need some interesting experience, and then you try to find private services. I think it's very much what you were saying, there just isn't funding government hotspots. And so there is public health, but there really isn't expertise in the public health system. The public health system in Australia is like underneath our but that's why we spend so much time in education. Public health system wants to apologise. And I really like what you were saying about focusing on unusual kind of circumstances, trying to, understand the systems and and they want to tick, they want to have psychosis and they want to be able to do that. That's the public health. And again, they're overwhelmed, they're busy. And it serves its purpose sometimes, but and we find it easy to work. We're private psychiatrists. We do, we're really trying, unfortunately, they're just too young. We're really trying to get so we find it easy to have some particularly and they provide in a way that is the legal program. But we find it easy to target some of them. And if you can target one of them to be about so maybe there's kind of networking possibility for psychiatrists in Australia to people like honestly, psychiatrists are so hard pressed that we don't have anybody. We do have psychologists, and I do know one psychiatrist. She's just not working in this area, but just trying to find people, like you say, because it's all about professional kind of pride.
Well, certainly, we're happy to do stuff around because we've got on staff who used to work in all the time. It's kind of our framework. But psychiatrists, that sort of that more medical that's where medicine and other professionals. We work a lot, there's a couple of psychiatrists we work a lot. There's actually a lady called Martine, who's a psychiatrist in the Rehabilitation Service. And I am sure she would be involved. She's so what you we do a lot of training and the way we get GPs and psychiatrists is we make sure the training is better than the training, but we have to do so much professional development. So we make sure the training is focused on and then we have to go and we do it
Right, no, you're right. It's nice. Yeah.
Because that's the medical piece. That's not everything. It's really but generally speaking, that's how we find it. But we certainly would have people who have expertise in that. So but for us, it's about it might
That's true. All you need is one or two.
all you need is one. And then they can come
Because one of the big things we use is periodical legal reports. We had a training with Dr. Cohen, did training. We had 20 people come. They got training. 6 reports for us. And there's only one left. We just don't know where people are going.
So that's one of the differences about Australia. I don't know what the legal system is here, but we don't but it uses like social reports. So we train and I have this guy who's kind of a referral expert called Guy Cocker. He's a lawyer and legal aid with asylum seekers, and people spend his time doing psychology with asylum seekers, and he's written a copy on psychosocial.
and we've got this. So what would be the difference? Well, one's about a GP. That's symptoms. You know, it's very much about often physical symptoms. Psychosocial ones are about what someone's experienced. So the psychosocial is about torture experience. It seems to be driven but essentially it's a reflection of the work we've done into those homes. So it's more around the torture experiences and around health as indifferent to around physical. So I don't know whether this is what it is like. But that experience will almost exclusively but some of it's hard to do that. It's easier to go to psychology is something else. Right into the side of things like, you know, and in fact we've got a workshop, so we've got a conference and he's going to hold
Maybe Miguel?
No, not at this stage. Someone else. So it's not that actually. So we do that. Would they accept those?
I'll see if we can look it up. I mean, it's all kind of it's quite conservative.
I was just saying that we're far more of a concentration on psychosocial reports and medical reports. And the issue of this is just to practitioners, they run a
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Of course, the thing is, people don't really understand the psychologist side of it. So there's I mean, our current anyway, so technicalities around it. So we're trying to deliver a project. We've got a few months left. It's something more about we just have to reach out to them again.
you might find we find this
it's not just the Hong Kong, it's just doctors and practice that they
Have your name up on the screen?
Wales.
Are you?
No.
But the service is in New South Wales.
No, it's actually based in Adelaide.
So I'm going to change it. South Australia.
Yeah,
There we go. Easy. Yeah, I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
I'm not sure how that ever got there, but
maybe that's first on the list.
I can sit just here on the end of this side if you like. I'm happy to use it.
Oh, no, I don't mind. I mean, you can, I don't mind. Yeah, you choose.
You've not got a slides presentation.
No, I'm just kind of talking.
That's fine. Yeah, we'll all join in at the best time.
Yeah.
Just for another couple of minutes and we'll allow people to
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it, so everyone is.
Oh, was that a present for me? Or somebody left it behind?
You know what I will do though? Is there let's check. Hey, please.
Or is it just in the open? It's an area.
Am I making a noise doing something here? Is that noise coming out of here? Or? I'm just not sure if I'm touching something or kicking something. I don't. Hello. Hello.
What's his?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's 9:01. Yeah.
Have people been given this outline?
No.
No. So they don't. Okay. Okay, thanks. That'll be fine. Shall I just start? Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Oughton. I'm now from South Australia. Thank you very much. Just kind of now for the elephant in the room, as we were just talking about. We'll let the elephants come in and settle down, and we'll talk about the other side of Australia's refugee system. It's very much a personal story for me, and I think that's probably the best way to approach this. There are some difficulties around what I'm supposed to be allowed to discuss. I want to be very transparent about that. Australian government did attempt fairly recently to basically prevent every single person who was working in offshore detention from saying anything to anyone, and it was kind of that broad. Talking to your next door neighbour, talking to certainly like a journalist or whatever, was illegal and sanctionable by 2 years jail. To the best of my knowledge, it never got tried out. It's never been tested. I know there's quite a few advocates that have come out and spoken vehemently in the hope that maybe that would get tested. The government were forced by just the overwhelming testimonies of many of the doctors and health professionals on the islands to give an exemption to health workers. Again, they came to that kicking and screaming, of course, but it's part of the attempt to completely shut everything down in terms of being able to share information. So I no longer work on the islands. My job finished when Manus Island in Papua New Guinea officially shut down. It's still 600, 500, we're not sure anymore because we don't get all the, necessarily all the accurate information. But there are still men kind of languishing there that I'm still employed by that agency to basically to do phone counselling because we're not allowed to actually go into the country, which is really inadequate, obviously, but it is really what I would like to talk about today. As I said, it's kind of a personal journey. I'm a psychotherapist, which in Australia, I don't know whether that is a confusing term for people, but in Australia that kind of means that my training is in therapeutic intervention, more or less on a one-to-one or group level, and that's what I specialise in. And it's kind of between a social worker counsellor, and it fills that gap to a clinical psychology, which kind of has its own, it's going off on its own path, which I kind of rejected a long time ago when I did a psychology degree. when I did that, I went out and worked in the community sector, and I've basically been working around health services and community sector in a range of jobs and positions since about the mid 80s. So I don't know whether I look my age, but I certainly feel it sometimes when I start thinking about that. I joined STARS, one of the network of fast agencies, and I think Tracy captured very, very well it's an amazing organisation. They are amazing organisations, you know. Back in the day, and I was very proud to join that. I was working in private practice. I took a particular interest politically and socially in the plight of refugees, and it was starting to become a more political issue in Australia. And it was an interest in working with torture and trauma survivors. And, you know, careful what you wish for. There I was. And within a couple of years of joining that organisation, I was asked to go and establish the Nauru Detention Centre was just being established. And historically, STARS and the fast agencies generally provide services in all the onshore detention centres. So it just kind of followed logically that we would do that. Somehow it fell to the South Australian branch or the South Australian agency, and I went and with a co-worker, and we established the service, the torture and trauma service in Nauru. At the time, Nauru was basically it was housing men travelling alone. They were called single adult males, but they weren't single. I mean, they'd left their families behind, and mostly they were men travelling alone, and adults, which kind of is what I had made my specialty. The families, women and children, and the families were actually on Manus Island at the time. This was deemed to be unsuitable because Manus Island has a lot of mosquito-borne diseases and whatever, and the conditions were very, very harsh there in terms of pregnant women and babies and whatever. So somehow after there was a massive riot and the whole place burnt down in Nauru in 2013, and I left. Just after that, which I'll just come back to in a second. Anyway, but they kind of swapped over. The men travelling alone went to Manus Island, and the families went to Nauru, where they are to this day, and that's probably what you hear most of the media coverage is about at the moment. So my personal journey as a therapist, I actually said to in the breakout session yesterday, I made the comment that I actually have an affinity for lawyers and legal people, and I think Adam commented that it's not something he hears very often from anybody, let alone health professionals. And I guess the reason that I do have that is that I formed this affinity in Manus Island because we were basically, there were two groups of people that would actually talk to each other, and they were the lawyers, the migration lawyers that were sent there, and the trauma counsellors that were sent there. And it's like you form this alliance with people that you can talk to, and with people that are a little bit more sympathetic to your cause. And I think what I'm hearing over the last couple of days is that more and more the people who are working in our area are working in hostile environments, and that's certainly what detention is, and that's certainly my experience of it. And even though, some of the stories and things that we've been hearing over the last couple of days, also that even when people aren't in detention, you're still kind of working in a very hostile environment. But my experience is that it's a very hostile environment. basically were working against the wishes of the managers of detention centres who are trying to run a really regulated, a really a kind of a highly it's almost a militarised show there, and everybody is supposed to to go along with everything. And of course, we were advocating very much for the rights of our clients, because what we were seeing was that this was completely inappropriate, what we were doing. To torture survivors, of course, who were our clients, but to anybody in particular. I mean, anybody that arbitrarily came after a certain date was deemed to be an illegal migrant or immigrant, and sent off for, at the time, processing to Nauru and to Manus Island. Words are so powerful, and there's very much this kind of Orwellian a sense of how we use these words of, we're going to process, but we're actually not going to do that. Anyway, I digress. Because it is a kind of a personal story, I tend to go off on some tangents, so do feel free to get me back onto a point that you're particularly interested. I don't mind being interrupted. I'd like to have a conversation, but I'm going to tell you the story, and that's going to cover a couple of issues, and then hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion about something that what we might be able to do to form some alliances in the future, and make some changes, particularly on the back of what we were talking about yesterday. I'm sorry, Juliet. Sorry, Juliet. She's not here. I forgot her name. We have a bit of a paucity of independent media in Australia. But there is an article that people might be interested in reading that's just been very recently published. It's from an immigration department worker, and it's fairly balanced. I mean, it's kind of like what we would like to say, trying to get some intellectual kind of debate happening, and put some different views. So it gives an interesting summary on what the kind of circumstance is at the moment. The government's under a lot of pressure to kind of make some changes in this. We know that we've basically broken every convention that we've signed over the last few years. And I have to say, this is a very recent event. As I said, I joined the FAST network. I'm very proud of what that stood for. And we've done some amazing work. And unfortunately, I think we've kind of lost our way. As a famous Prime Minister once said, Juliet Gillard. Juliet Gillard, for people who aren't familiar with that. So my personal story. I think when I arrived in Nauru, as I said, I trained as a psychotherapist, and of course, what I had surrounded myself with was all the framework, all the scaffolding, maybe as we call it, all the things that gave me a sense of comfort and kind of protection and working within a comfort zone. And a whole lot of tools in a toolbox that gave me the sense that I'm going to be able to help people. And I kind of look back on that now. I miss that naive Gary, but nonetheless, I've actually travelled a very long way. So my initial stint in Nauru was, as I said, it was very early days. We only just established it. The actual detention centre had only been operating for about 6 months by the time we arrived. And then within 9 months, the whole place had burnt down. There was a massive riot. The tension in the camp was, of course, palpable leading up to that. I can talk for hours on that, but I'm going to kind of skip over some of this, and I don't mean that doesn't mean that it wasn't important, but it was just the way that this has developed. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means for torture survivors. And I actually left Nauru feeling pretty shattered, I'd have to say. My confidence was gone. What I realised was that no matter what, all the kind of the tools that I had and all the clever things that I thought that I was going to impart to my clients, which I had worked with torture survivors before, I wasn't that new to it. But of course the difference is, it was extreme. The difference in circumstance was extreme. These were people who had actually settled. And I think we all know what happens to people who are torture survivors. I mean, they're so busy surviving that everything just is pushed aside. They finally get to a place, and they might be in a place for 3 months or 6 months, and they're then learning some new things. But suddenly, a whole lot of the things that they've just been kind of pushing down and carrying either like in their backpack or holding in there wherever they keep all their stress and anxiety, it all starts to come to the surface, and that's when we get called in. And that's when they come to us, and they say that they're not operating on or functioning very well on a day-to-day basis. And then we start that process of trying to process and help them to live with the experiences that they've had. As Tracy was saying, we can't cure that, we can't be rid of that. But they've been so busy kind of shutting all that down. That they haven't really even thought about it until they get to a place of safety. So in Nauru, of course, what we were seeing was that the rise of uncertainty and the rise of, I don't see much processing happening here in my particular case, is what our clients were saying, and kind of watching them deteriorate. And kind of watching them just get worse and worse, the uncertainty, and most of the men that were my clients were totally terrified of what was happening in their own countries to their families, being left in war-torn countries and being hunted down by the Taliban or the Sinhalese or. I guess to say Middle Eastern people, the most persecuted minorities, Hazara, Kurdish, Awazi, people from Pakistan, people from Sri Lanka, and then add to that the men from Somalia and Sudan and less so, but other parts of Africa, all kind of finding themselves put onto this little island in the middle of nowhere. So I was desperately trying to reconcile myself with my own practice. I mean, I thought that I'd actually been quite successful as a clinician and a practitioner. So I was pretty shattered to find out how ineffective that was. And I kind of came home and locked myself away and thought that it's just such a strange career to follow, if you like. And I think that a lot of people here will kind of recognise this. Once you actually start working in this area, it's just really hard to let it go, because the reason you get into it in the first place is a kind of a sense of passion and political justice and fairness and whatever. And it's really hard to let it go, and I just felt like I needed to find a way of getting better at it. I didn't really want this to be that to be the end of my work with refugees in asylum, in detention. So I put my hand up. I did a lot of searching and soul searching, and we were also doing a lot of searching on the internet for some answers to how is it, where's all the research and where's all the really clever the research or the articles or whatever that tell us how we actually do this. And what we found to our dismay was that there weren't many, and we were kind of making this up as we went. It's like we were in this really big experiment, and it was going to get worse, although we didn't kind of realise that at the time. So we had to start kind of documenting and making things work for ourselves. So I went back with some different strategies. I talked to a lot of people. I said, we've got to kind of try things. I watched a lot of very, very competent therapists, psychologists, counsellors, social workers, whatever, come and go. We had a pretty high attrition rate. It was getting to the point where it was becoming really difficult to tolerate the level of unfairness and injustice that we were seeing our clients put through. So there were a lot of people me and myself included, we became so incensed by the injustice that I think what I realised when I reflected very long and hard on while in between that Manus Island journey was that I actually had kind of lost my way a little bit. I was so angry about everything, and watching my co-workers get really angry about it as well, and realising that was actually detracting from my capacity to work with my clients. I was angry for them and angry with them, but it didn't mean, it basically meant that my capacity to intervene in their situation had become quite ineffective. I really had to look long and hard at that, and also reflect on how I was seeing that my co-workers were coping, and that we had become quite ineffective. And if we were going to be effective, as initially we were called advocates, but that was just kind of taken away, like counsellor advocates, as we are on the mainland. But that was kind of taken away because we were basically unable to advocate on anything for anything. So we just kind of bit the bullet and said, okay, we're just going to be honest here. We're going to call ourselves counsellors, therapists, trauma therapists. And so I guess what I did is that, having reflected on that practice, we as an organisation and me as a person really had to make a decision about, I'm either going to do one thing or another. I'm either going to be a political activist and actually protest and tell the government, not that we weren't telling the government that they were doing the wrong thing, but really publicly and openly tell the government and fight for those rights, or I'm actually going to provide the service that we're there to provide. And that is to try and help torture survivors cope with being a torture survivor.